Welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission regular monthly meeting for June 3rd, 2013. Can we start with roll call, please?
Commissioner Jimian? Commissioner Chan?
Present.
President Armenian?
Present.
Commissioner Dentler? Commissioner Yao?
Here.
Next agenda item.
2A, approval of the April 20th, 2013 special meeting minutes.
Approval of that'd be approval of the May 20th, 2013 minutes.
Good catch. I'm going to suggest that we defer this item to a future meeting since two of our commissioners are absent. I'd like to give them the opportunity to weigh in as well.
If we could have a motion to continue, we could.
Yes, I'd like to move that we move the agenda item to next meeting.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next agenda item, please.
3, action item 3A, GWP Commission policy for agendizing commissioner business. 1, resolution adopting revised policy.
President Armenian and members of the GWP Commission, at the last Commission special meeting, you had directed me to put together a policy consistent with your direction regarding agendizing business for the agenda. I've prepared and have attached to your information a resolution which I hope captures the intent of the motion that was adopted at the special meeting, and I present it to you for your consideration.
Do we have any comments? Or do you want a minute to review?
Can the council specifically address the certain sections that will be replaced, just a recap, and what's new that's being added?
Sure. So the change is the section C of, section 2 of the resolution, item C, is new, which gives the president, in consultation with GWP staff, the authority to place items of business on the GWP Commission agenda without a second commissioner expressing an interest. And that can be done either during a commission meeting or outside of a commission meeting. In all other respects, it's the same as the policy that you had previously adopted.
I have no further comments.
No,
Further
that's
comments?
fine.
So,
Okay, we do have someone asking to speak on the matter, Mr. Herbert Milano.
President Armenian, members of the Commission, my name is Herbert Milano. I have a couple of questions concerning this particular item. What is the problem that you're trying to solve with this? My guess is that things come up between meetings that are necessary for you to encounter at the following meeting for discussion. But yet there are sections in here, if that's the case, why is the issue of the two commissioners needed to approve an agenda item? I think that's a problem for the following reason. Most of you come with a significant life experience within your area, within your professional area. And oftentimes, for example, Ms. Dentler at the last meeting may have asked something from the city attorney's office for clarification of something. That's something that's very particular to her experience as a lawyer that would bring up something that is of interest to all of you. And it seems logical that maybe someone says, yes, I agree with you, let's put it on the agenda. But what if it's something a little bit more contentious? And what if there are only 3 commissioners present? Then that item may not get on the agenda, yet it might be important. I think that this particular policy should be changed so that any one commissioner could make a request, because it's really not a problem. You don't do it that frequently. You're not taxing significantly on the staff. And I think that most of you are smart enough and professional enough to be diligent with regard to your requests. I personally have a problem with the whole idea of having 2 individuals having to concur, particularly from my experience in the City Council. Because when Bob Yusefian had issues that were contentious, for example, having to do with the overtime, and none of the other council members wanted it, it never got on the agenda. He never got a response. And I remember that specifically. So for most of the items, it's not going to be a problem. You are going to get another commissioner to concur. But I would suggest that you hold off on this and maybe wait until a new commissioner come on board and see how he or she might feel towards this. I think that this should be changed to such that any one commissioner could make a request. Look, you have an entity that has revenues of over $240 million a year. Your requests, generally given your professional background, generally are pertinent and germane to the issues having to do with the running of the Glendale Water and Power. So if the staff needs to spend 16 hours or even 32 hours giving that kind of a budget or that kind of entity, I think it's worthwhile. I think that most of you have been selected with a significant amount of diligence in mind with regard to your level of professionalism. And I think that any one commissioner should be able to bring up an item that is pertinent to your level of experience and concern. I've also have a bit of a problem when things like this kinds of policy changes come immediately before an election or immediately before a major change in the commission structure. I really get suspicious because my experience with those is not very good with what I have seen. So I strongly suggest for this particular item to be postponed until you have a new commissioner and you have maybe other points of view that you might want to consider. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions as a result of that?
Well, I just want to comment that based on the background that we discussed in past meetings, and since I was here when the original resolution was adopted, and that's why I brought this back for this meeting, was to clarify that the role of the president has the authority to agendize an item during or outside a meeting, even with his own opinion, if no other commissioners agree to it. So because we elect a president among this body, I think he or she should have that authority. But when we adopted this resolution back in 2010, I guess that was my misunderstanding, that it didn't clarify that the president of this commission has that authority. So that's why I want to bring this back, so that at least we have one commissioner as the president who can agendize an item during or after our meetings. But I think I do agree that we should have two other non-elected official commissioners to agree and express that they're willing to agendize an item, because that just prevents staff from spending additional time that may not be necessary if only one commissioner is interested. I know I agree that Mr. Milano says we're all professionals here and we know what we're trying to do here, but I think that if we don't have two commissioners' concurrence, I think staff shouldn't be spending the time when there's only one commissioner who's interested. So I think that we should adopt this policy the way that it's been changed, so that we at least have the president of the commission have the authority to agendize an item. So that's just my opinion.
Ms. Godinez, in terms of city council and the way they govern it, is it similar to this? It takes two to...
It takes two, and the mayor does not have the unilateral authority to put items on the agenda.
So this is one step beyond even...
This is a step beyond what the council has.
Personally, I'm comfortable because I think if there aren't more than one, if there's not more than one commissioner on an issue, then that suggests that that's not necessarily a priority issue for the commission. So I do see the two commissioner outside the president test in terms of prioritization as a good test. And I don't think that there's been anything that, at least in my tenure here, where we've prevented a commissioner from making a case on an issue where other commissioners haven't backed that commissioner. Obviously, you never know. Different composition of commissioners behave differently, but I do think the two-commissioner test is a good test, and I do like the improvement of the president. Again, I don't think that there's been anything during my tenure as president that has not been able to get on the agenda, but I do think issues sometimes come up in between sessions where the president, in consultation with staff, may reorient the agenda, may add things, may subtract things, or at least add things, I should say, that might come up, and it allows the commission to be more timely on the issues. So in that sense, I do agree with the modification that we're proposing to.
Okay, this is how I feel about it. I am comfortable with the two commissioners outside of the president making suggestions on the topics to be discussed and put on the agenda, and I'm comfortable with the additional verbiage, item C. However, I do think that maybe it's better if we postpone or until the full commission comes on. In order to pass this today, all three of us will need to agree, right?
No, two of you.
Just two
out
of the three?
Mhm.
Okay. I think it would be my preference to wait till we have the whole new commission, because, I mean, you and I are voting today, but we may not be here. So.
Okay.
How do you feel? Yeah.
Well, I don't think we need to wait, because this is like anything else, a change resolution, the one from the one that we adopted 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. So I think it helps with this cause, because the next few meetings there might be agenda items that Mr. President might want to brought forth even after our meetings. So this will help him with that perspective. And so if we do have a new commission, we can always re-adopt what the new commission would want to adopt. If one commissioner needs to agendize an item, then that is the prerogative of the new commission.
I mean, my perspective is, again, I don't think that there's been a problem in terms of agendizing things. I do think it's, while I do agree with Commissioner Chan in that it would be preferable for the full commission to be here, I do think it reflects the sentiments from the last commission meeting where we were all present, and I think there was concurrence at that time. So in that sense, I'm comfortable with moving forward on it. But again, I could go either way. It's not. I don't think there's a pressing matter here that can't.
And I don't mean to have the full existing commission. It's with the new commissioners coming on.
Well, it sounds like you have two potential proposals, and either one of the commissioners other than the president can make a motion in regard to what your point of view is. President Armenian, you also could make a motion if you pass the gavel, but we would need a motion and a second, and then we need at least two of you to adopt something.
Well, and I don't want to waste any time, so I'd rather move this resolution the way it is written, and we can move on. So I moved 2A1 to adopt the resolution to revise this policy of agendizing the commission meetings.
Mr. President, can I ask for a clarification? I'm getting a little confused. So if we're at a commission meeting, it takes two commission members to put something on the agenda.
Correct.
Outside of the commission, the president can unilaterally do it with consultation with staff.
Well, the president doesn't require a second person to agree to put something on the agenda. They consult with staff, and then we will put the item on the agenda, provided it's within their jurisdiction.
That's outside of a meeting.
Outside or inside a meeting. So president unilaterally.
So we could be at a meeting today, the president could say he wanted to do something, and none of the other commission members want that. And how does that consultation with staff? Forgive me, I'm just trying to clarify.
That's an excellent question. That would either have to be during the commission meeting, or we would have had to have had the conversation previously.
Because it seems kind of awkward to have that conversation at a commission meeting, especially
Indeed.
if it's the first time that conversation's been taken up. I don't know how you feel, Mr. Armenian, but for you and I to engage in a conversation, it seems it would be better served by doing that offline. I mean, I can understand the issue of being in between meetings, wanting to get something on. I'm just, again, trying to clarify.
So we could revise the policy to either eliminate the requirement of consultation with staff or to require that that conversation have taken place before the meeting. And there are a couple alternatives to deal with that, what you describe as that.
I just think that would be smoother. It would
Certainly.
be, and in that way, there would be no unexpected issues that suddenly
So
come up
in
for
other
staff
wo-
to
in
say,
other words-
well, we can't do that.
In other words, we could have C actually pertain to agendizing outside of the commission meeting,
That's how I was taking it, Mr. Armenian, and I could.
which I think is what the objective is, right? To allow the president some leeway between commission meetings.
It is, but-
that's the intent, is it not?
It is intent, but also I would prefer that the president of the commission can suggest during the meeting to agendize an item. I mean, my read on consultation with staff is that that the president can ask the staff, does it make sense if we can bring back this item? And staff says, oh, that's not a problem at all. That's like consulting staff. But if staff or Mr. Zun says that it will take 100 days to provide a report on that subject that only the president would like to see, then, of course, maybe the other commissioners will intervene, saying, hey, 100 hours of staff time 100 days of staff time is not appropriate. And so those type of consultations.
But in which case, president can say, I don't care, you're going to do it. Right? I mean, within the parameters of this is what I'm saying. I mean, obviously, we're painting the extreme scenario here.
Right.
That's kind of where I was coming from.
Yeah.
As long as we're at a meeting, why couldn't there be two commission members? Because if the president then does unilaterally push something through, I'd hate to see if that becomes something that gridlocks, because we can't do it from a staffing level, and the president, I'm sure this would never happen, present company included, where he would say, Steve, I don't care, you do what I told you to do. I don't ever expect it to get to that way. But I just thought, as long as you're all 5 here, having 2 of you say, yeah, that's good. That makes sense, but again, I thought it was more for offline.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
understanding of the intent of it, but obviously the way it reads, it doesn't necessarily restrict to that. What if we did this? What if we, could we come up with a version of it that does narrow it to outside of the commission meeting? And then we can present both of these at the next commission meeting. Hopefully by then there will be some clarity on who's here, who's not, because I don't know when that decision will be made. So that way we'll hopefully have a full commission meeting at that time too.
So it'll be.
Because I do think it leaves some leeway for some awkwardness. Again, in a more extreme scenario, I don't see that happening with this group, but I think that I think the intent of it was between meetings, not necessarily at the meetings.
But then.
Obviously, a president could still work around it and say, okay, well, I didn't get my second during the meeting, so then I'm going to wait till the meeting ends, and then you could still.
But Commissioner Yao indicated that he also wants to be able to have the president just agendize an item if only the president wants it. That's also another element to this.
Yeah, so
right?
that's why I was
that has to be
suggesting.
rewritten. Yeah.
That's why I was suggesting that maybe you could have both versions,
Right.
and we can have a discussion at full when everyone's here, and then we can resolve that in terms of whether or not they want to go with the more narrow version or we'll go with the wider version.
Well, my preference is the way it's stated, that it
Right.
would give the president the authority during the meetings to maybe get advice from staff and then place an item on an agenda, because the elected position should have some authority, even though that person closed or opened the meeting, but I think that person should have that position of authority to place an item.
I'm not an attorney, but to be careful with that language, no one position has any greater authority over anything than another. Am I right by that?
That's correct.
That's just the position of running the meeting and conducting the daily business. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
There's one position is not more
If
powerful than any
you
other
define the
commission.
authority
Everyone has the same
by
vote.
being able to individually place an item on an agenda, then I guess it has that much more authority or
the-
capability, right? In terms
Yeah.
of, that's what we're saying here
Right.
with this motion.
Right. So to move this forward, Commissioner Yao had made a motion to adopt the resolution as written.
Yeah.
And I guess the next step is there a
So
second?
is there a second? Okay, so with no second, then we don't move forward with
That
it.
the motion fails.
Do we have to do a motion to ask for that different version as well?
Someone would need to move, and someone would need to second that motion as well.
Is there interest in
Okay,
that?
so I'll move to have that C part rewritten to 2 parts. One is the ability to agendize items outside of the commission meeting by the president only, after he or she consults with GWP staff. And then the other part is the president being able to agendize an item solely by himself or herself in the commission meeting.
So in other words, 2 different versions?
2 different parts. Break it up to 2 parts, right? And we want both of those.
So just to,
Well, I think what Mr. Zern was pointing out was that the second part of being able to individually dictate an agenda item was what the awkward part was, because then the consultation would have to happen in real time.
My point was, as long as
No
you're all...
consultation with the second part. You don't need to include the consultation portion in the second scenario.
I think you're inherently going to need some consultation with staff, just as we do when we do the agenda setting, because you have the issue of timing, you have the issue of, is it within your jurisdiction? So there's always going to be some minimal consultation needed.
During the meeting.
Absolutely.
Which we have been having.
Or even outside, if that's the way it goes, and the president calls me, talks to me about something, and I say, yeah, that's doable, here's what it will take. It'll take me a couple months, it'll take me a couple weeks. I think Ms. Chan, what I was getting at was, as long as we're here in this meeting, I don't see, this is just me. I don't see why you couldn't have two people agree to a particular item. But outside of the meeting, I like the idea that the president has some leeway to say, we're 2 weeks from the next meeting, and this is a really hot item. It may be something that just came up. We need to talk about this. I'm going to go ahead and talk to GWP staff, and we're going to agendize that and get it on. I think that's a very valuable tool to have. That was just my.
And I want to point out, I mean, you do retain your rights under the Glendale Municipal Code and the Brown Act to call, the president can call a special meeting unilaterally, as long as it's within the jurisdiction of this commission at any time, as can any 3 commissioners.
So there is a little bit more power.
Yeah, so that's the nuance, a difference between what you were suggesting and what has been discussed.
I don't feel very strongly about that second part, whether the president solely can place an item on the agenda or having another person, because just as Commissioner Armenian indicated earlier, we have not had any issue in the past. We have always had a second person supporting, the first person making the suggestion. So I don't feel strongly about that second part.
Because if that's the case, then really you don't even have to rewrite this, because as it is worded now, the president can do that within the meeting as well, right?
Just going to read through, make sure it states that.
And it says during also. Yeah. See, either during or outside that last sentence.
So we would just revise that last sentence just to refer to outside, make clear that this paragraph C is just dealing with outside of a commission meeting.
Yeah.
Which means that the president would not be able to do it inside the meeting.
That's right. Yeah.
You still
With a second, you can,
Second.
not
With a
alone.
second. Yeah.
So do we need a motion to suggest this revised language?
Yes, I think Commissioner Chan was making that motion. Is that the case? Or maybe you can clarify what the motion is that you're proposing.
I'll go through the motion. I may not get a second. But anyway, I think where the discussions led to now is that we will keep C, but take out during the GWP Commission meeting portion. So the C part can move forward outside of a GWP Commission meeting. As a result of this, it means that the president will still need to have a second every time he or she wants to put an item on the agenda, just like during the meeting, just like any other commissioners.
Okay.
Is there a second to that motion?
So is the motion to bring back that?
The motion is to eliminate the during part, to have it come back with the language changed so that the either during a GWP commission meeting, that part would come out.
Okay. So we can adopt this if there's a second?
But it's going to be written and brought back next month, right? Or are we approving this right
Depends
now?
on your
We can do
motion.
it right
We could
now
do
if you
on
want.
the
We can do it right
fly.
now.
Yeah, you just have Ms. Godinez read back to you
I
the
see.
revised language. Did you make a motion on that and get a second and take a vote? And it seemed pretty simple, at least just taking out that one part. If you want to read back the new C or the proposed C.
C would read, notwithstanding the foregoing, outside of a commission, GWP commission meeting, the president of the GWP commission, in consultation with GWP staff, may place an item on the GWP commission agenda. Where the president requests that a matter be agendized, and we could add outside of a commission meeting, it is not necessary for a second commissioner to also express an interest in placing that item on the GWP commission agenda in order for the item to be placed on the commission agenda. And then we would take out the last sentence.
Yeah, so just eliminate the entire last sentence of that.
Right.
So is there a second to that motion?
Yeah, I'll second it. Get it over with.
Reluctant second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. For all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes, carries. Next agenda item, please.
4A, community outreach update.
Mr. President, at our last meeting, just a couple weeks ago, Ms. Hartunian had come up and given you an overview of our outreach program for our upcoming proposed electric rate increase. And I had said at the time there were a couple of loose ends we hadn't finished up. We'd bring her back this meeting and have her give you the most up-to-date version of our efforts. Tina, it's all yours.
Hey, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Hello, my name is Atine Hartunian. I'm here to give you another update on our outreach up to this far and moving forward. I'd like to draw your attention to our website. This is where we are going to be guiding all of our customers for all things rate related, all information, any downloads, rate calculator, whatever they need more information on. We're going to point customers here and they could access all the information. If you just go to our main website, if you click on the top right, upper right tab called Rates, if you click on that, it'll take you to our rates page. And as we scroll down, this is all the current information about the proposed rate structure, and then a listing of all of our community meeting dates and locations. And then underneath that, it's the frequently asked questions page, and this is what I was talking about last presentation, where if customers cannot attend a community meeting, they can ask us a question, and that comes to me actually, and then I share it with our executive team, and we will send a response to the customer and also post their question on our frequently asked questions page without using their name, so that in case any other customers have similar questions, they can have that addressed. Underneath that are important links that will soon all be hyperlinked. We have our direct customer mail letter going out. It'll be in mailboxes shortly. Then we'll have translations of the letter. We have our flyer that I'd like to show you, and I also gave you a hard copy. And this flyer, again, will be translated into different languages, and when we distribute the flyer, the translations will be on the back. They're not currently on the back of your issue, but they will be, and then they'll also be posted on our website. And underneath the flyer, you can see we have a QR code, so customers can scan that QR code, and it'll take them directly to our Google Maps page that I showed you last time. That Google Maps link is also on our website. And then, like I said, the rate calculator will be available soon, where customers can go in and put in their usage information, and it'll calculate their rate for the next 5 years and give them the information about how much the increase is and how it affects them. And then we'll be recording our second community presentation, and we'll have that PowerPoint available and the video available for customers, again, who can't make the community meetings. In addition to the flyer, I also gave you a handout. It's a listing of all of our different outreach that we're doing in addition to our community meetings. Some of the newspapers that we'll be advertising in, including print and online, some of the special presentations that we have to certain stakeholder groups, and any distributions of flyers and press release information and newsletter information. Do you have any questions about the outreach?
Questions?
Oh, yes, just have a few questions. I know that you're going to have these meeting locations. Is there a specific goals that you're trying to obtain on attendance? Or just gather how many people you can come?
Our goal is to get the information out to as many people as possible, and then that's a personal decision that folks make. Again, we talked about this last year. We can't base our success on how many people show up. This may be an issue of interest to some, and maybe not to others. Our attendance last year was, I'd say, pretty mediocre, but it wasn't for a lack of getting information out, and this year even more so. Ms. Hartunian has this out on every social media and every conceivable place. We've got it translated in another language. We have it literally in some cases, Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, we're putting it on windshields of cars after Mass or during Mass.
Well, we'll be utilizing it, the community-based organizations and churches and however they want to distribute the information. But yes, as Mr. Zern said, we can't control the number of people that attend, but that doesn't mean they're not getting the information. And we're also sending out that direct mail piece, and that goes directly to the customers in a separate letter apart from their bill, and that gives them that information and any information on meetings. So community meetings aren't always attended very well, but at least we know we've put out the information and we can go back and trace our steps for our outreach.
Yeah, you may have thought of this already, but I don't know if you have a JPEG of this flyer?
Yes.
So that you can kind of have other organizations distribute it through their social media channels?
Yes, we will provide them with that.
Be great. This is good.
I remember the last time we did this, there was a committee formed, correct?
Yes, and there was again this year.
Okay.
A stakeholder committee or a user committee, a cross-representation of different groups.
Okay.
Business customers, big business, small business, homeowners,
Okay.
school districts. And so we've had 2 meetings with them, gotten a lot of really good feedback, and we've incorporated that into some of our presentations as well.
Okay.
I think we have one more meeting.
Yes, we have one more meeting to recap all of our community meetings, and we actually invite our group to our community meetings. So.
Okay.
And I believe at our last meeting, we handed out a list of who those stakeholders, committee members
we did.
were.
Okay,
So-
okay, great. And I remember the last time we went through this, I don't recall exactly which groups they were, but toward the end of the process, I believe there were some groups that complained about not having heard about these meetings. I don't know whether you recall or not.
We had some feedback, Ms. Chan, that the meetings were not necessarily convenient for everybody, and our response was, we can't customize those. We try to get every geographical area in the city. What we did different this year is we reached out to certain groups and said, if you want an individual custom meeting, let us know. Let us know far enough in advance and we'll be there. Homeowners Coordinating Council, we're going there tonight. Chamber of Commerce, we're going to do that. We've got several others that we're going to do these customized meetings in addition to the general public meetings. So that was our belief, because the information was, we got a lot of information out. It's possible somebody missed it. It's possible folks don't have a computer or don't use a computer, and a lot of our stuff was on computer. If you don't come to city buildings, you might not have seen them on counters and things like that. So there's a chance that we missed some folks. But I think one of the things that stuck out with me was, that was tough on Tuesday night to go all the way up to La Crescenta. But we had one here. Well, yeah, but how about in our neighborhood? So it got down to neighborhood meetings that would be most convenient. Northwest was one that reached out to us. So.
Right, yeah.
I think what Ms. Chen might be referring to is that was regarding the water rates, and it was had to do with the commercial customers. I believe specifically.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it really kind of centered on that fire line rate, which became very controversial. And we did a forensic sort of after-the-fact review with a number of customers, including the chamber, same kind of stakeholder group, and defragged this whole thing and got their feedback of where we had made some mistakes. And it was getting, not so much having the meetings, but getting the proper information out at the meetings, especially this fire line issue and how that would impact business customers. So we did. That's a good point. We learned a lot from that in general of how to structure the meetings and to make sure that we are open and honest, even if it isn't the best news in the world to the customer, that it may be a significant impact. We need to be very open and honest from day one.
Right.
So those customers would be caught would be hopefully captured in the large commercial customers meeting.
We're inviting them to our police community room, which we'll be meeting with them and presenting the same information.
Great.
So for those viewers that are watching right now, and if they're interested in these, is there a contact person they should call? They, go to the counter? Can you give your name and number?
Yes, sure. They can call our customer service department at 818-548-3300. They can also be directed to our website, glendalewaterandpower.com, and click on the rates tab at the top of the page. And if any customer can't print out any of the information or can't access the website, if they call our customer service department, we'll be happy to send them that information.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just curious about one thing. I know that these are good meetings to have in the community. But as someone who may be low income or on fixed income seniors, how would these people, or what would we tell those people why they should show up? I mean, what kind of impact they would have? I mean, what kind of, if they show up and listen to some kind of presentation and maybe hear that, oh, your rate's going to go up, but what kind of impact would they have if they were to show up? Can you describe a scenario so that maybe make people feel that they can make a difference by showing up?
Well, okay, first, to answer the first part of the question, what we'll have at every meeting would be not only the presentation that we're giving to customers, but we'll also have staff present to talk to customers and show them how the rate calculator works and sit down with the customer. We even advise them to bring their bill if they'd like, and we'd show them how their usage is entered into the rate calculator and how that impacts their bill. And as we're utilizing all the community-based organizations and different types of outreach, those customers will be reached, even through our direct mail letter, they will be reached, and then we will see, however, if they're not reacting or if they have more questions, we will be reaching out to them differently. We also have one representative that represents the low-income community in our stakeholder group, so he has had a lot of really good input as to how we outreach to these types of customers. So he provides constant feedback.
Okay, would there be a direct impact to those people attending where instead of just maybe asking questions, but can they reduce their rates somehow? Is there a message that we're trying to provide to show that they have a reduction in rates? If
They can bring, it's always beneficial to participate. It's always beneficial. Now, if you're going to say, well, I'm not going to go to the meeting because you're going to raise the rates anyway, yeah, absolutely, we're going to propose raising the rates. We have no other choice. We are going to do that. But if somebody, let's say, in your example from the low income, came in and started to talk about different things, that may give Mr. Keenan and his staff the ability to go back and look at how could we maybe restructure the subsidy, for instance. Something we may not have thought about or took a look at. But that sparks something where we can go back. Doesn't mean we may change the rate, but we may be able to increase the subsidy for low income and seniors. So certainly for folks to come out, and we had a great meeting last year at St. Mary's where it was primarily low income, new residents to the city, new residents to the country, to be honest with you. And we got a lot of really good feedback from them at that meeting. So, again, when you say impact, I don't want people to think, I'm going to come out and change the whole process. That's likely not going to happen. But you can certainly shed some light on areas that we may not have thought about.
Right.
And that occurs, positively, that occurs at almost every meeting. We get something. So I would encourage as many people to come out. You want to come out and yell at us? You want to come out and tell us where we may have missed something or where an impact that we haven't overlooked. So I'd love to hear all those things.
Right, that I was trying to get at. It was like we have these great meetings, but sometimes people feel like they're overwhelmed or they don't make a difference because if they're coming out, they might not do anything to impact the rate increase, but at least if they come out, we do see their perspective and maybe potentially change or take into consideration some things that we may have not thought about.
And that's a good point because one of the things in our meeting format last year was very impersonal, very sort of cattle call, I'll call it. Everybody comes into a meeting, we give a presentation, you start lining up and asking questions. Often those questions are dominated by a small, certain group of people. And in other cases, people are hesitant to get up, they're hesitant to ask a question, they feel intimidated. That's that whole situation of, well, I don't want to come across as not understanding or being dumb because I asked a question. This year, we're changing that format. We're going to a breakout session where it's much more personal, where all of my staff, we'll have attorneys there, we'll have customer service people. You'll be able to go around. I'll be there. You can come sit at the table and talk to me about something. You can talk to Mr. Linz about power supply. You can talk to Mr. Abuega about water or electric and the infrastructure. It gives you a lot more opportunity to go one-on-one with staff. So hopefully that'll draw more response out. Because that was one of the disappointing things last year. We did have lower attendance, but also the questions were the same. We showed you some examples. Week after week, it was the same question from the same people. That's not real productive. So we're hoping this year's format will improve on that.
Great. Well, sounds like a great plan. Thank you.
Great. I think this is a really good plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have one, someone from the public who wants to speak, Mr. Herbert Milano.
Commission President Armenian, Commissioners, my name is Herbert Milano. Commissioner Yao, your first question was right, spot on. How do you measure success? I can vouch for you, having run my own company for a very long time, that if I were to give marketing the objective of bringing in at least 16 people to a seminar, that's the measure of success. If only 5 people show up, that would not be acceptable as a measure of performance for the people doing the marketing. There's no way. Because we know that in order to get that number of people, it requires that the message be effective. To basically put the burden on the public to say if they don't show up, well, it's kind of like their problem, I don't accept that. And that really is the problem when you have a monopoly. It doesn't have to be city government. It could be, a monopoly within the gas company or Southern California Edison. Same deal. You don't need a sales force, at least not for right now, not until you get some really good competition. But if you did have the competition, I can bet you that the message will actually come across. But here's the point. The purpose, is my time is only 25 seconds? Sorry. These meetings, from my interpretation, really is to persuade the public to accept a rate increase. That's really the purpose. Because if the public were to, imagine for a moment that you really, truly wanted to get the input from those individuals who are going to be hard-pressed for it. What would you do? You would go into the computer system and you pick out the names and the addresses of everyone who received a 48-hour notice of impending shutoff. You're going to find tens of thousands of people who did during the last 3-4 years. And you send a special notice with the very top of the message that will say, your rates may increase if you don't show up. That's going to get their attention, and that's a directed message to them. A couple of years ago, during the water rate increases, we had, or one of the water issues, I can't remember precisely which one it was, we had a meeting at Spar Heights. There were over 35 people present at that time. In other words, when it is up to staff to truly get those people in here, they'll get them in. But not if you don't play or make them accountable to it. They can fail totally. I went to practically all of those meetings. Yeah, it was the same 4 or 5 people. Especially the last one, there's only 1 or 2 individuals from residents that show up. They have control of how the message is, how the message is advertised, when it is advertised, the times of the sessions, how it is presented, in different ways. They have control of that, and you're not making them accountable to that success. Here's what I would ask. I would say, if you do not have at least 20 people showing up at each one of those meetings, whatever happens in that meeting cannot count towards any policy change. And you put the burden on the staff to actually produce. That's the continual problem in just about every department that I've seen here in Glendale. No performance outcomes, and no one is held accountable to it. What if we were to put his pay increases in the future to the results here? To making sure that we get at least, let's say, 200 people showing up to these meetings. That's the way it should be done. Because these rate increases impact people in a very hard way. What if we were to go out and impact, let's say, bring in beauty salons and people who have, retail, commercial, restaurants, for example, heavy uses of electricity, and make a strong focus to them that says, this is for restaurants only. And we bring you in, and I guarantee you're going to find individuals in there who are hard-pressed today. There's a baker shop right here on Broadway near Adams. There's that lady is a husband and wife. They are there every single day, and believe me, they told me personally that they're having struggles trying to keep that place running. The electricity rates are too high for them. So we have to look, are these meetings are going to include comparisons with, let's say, Burbank's rates, or comparison to Los Angeles rates, for the same equivalent type of business with the same usage of kilowatt hours. That's what's relevant, and that is what needs to be presented back to you. You say, we found that 20% of the people out there were really concerned, especially the small shop owners or the beauty salon owners were very concerned, that they were not going to be able to remain in business with this kind of rate increases. That's what you want back. You want the reality to come back to you, not be massaged as it was the last couple of times these meetings were done. Believe me, if this were a business and I were running it, I have fired lots of people, lots of them, and I wouldn't mind firing people, but you can't do it here. Because no matter if they screw up, they're still not responsible. It's a civil commission, setting where no matter how bad the results, they still get the pay increases and the benefits. Nobody's held accountable. Why can't it change? It's a monopoly situation where the residents have very little choice. And at least what we want is to have that information clearly stated and documented so at least people know. Only in 2009 did we have a major protest against the utility rates, and they were the highest in California for any public utility. Thank you.
I had one question. In terms of after we're done with this outreach, will you present a summary back to commission of some of
Mr.
the
President,
outcomes?
it'll be part of the whole rate presentation, the special meeting.
Okay.
So as we did last year, if you recall, we'll start out by going through our outreach and then getting right into the actual rate proposal.
Okay, great. Thank you. Other questions? Okay, next agenda item, please.
4B, GWP Budget 2013-14.
Mr. President, Eric Campbell, our finance administrator, is poised and ready to go through the proposed budget, and there's also some comparisons to current year budget and projected. Mr. Yao, we snuck in a column for you. I did get your email about what our projected expenditures were for the end of the year. We only have up till April, and we projected from there. With that, Mr. Campbell.
Great, thank you. President Armenian, members of the Commission, my name is Eric Campbell. I'm the Finance Administrator for Glendale Water and Power. What I've got here is it's the presentation that was put before the City Council recently. Let's go through a few things. Here's what I'm going to go through is the GWP budget overview at a very high level, and then I'll spend a little bit more time on in both of the utilities looking at their long-term capital plans. So at about a 30,000-foot level, the combined numbers for Glendale Water and Power are, it's big. There's a $300 million budget, and there's 324 employees combined. A couple of the big goals there you can read through. You've heard about some of these, I'm sure by now. The rate restructure and increase that we're working on the electric side. We're working on completing the capital plan and bond issue, which is tied on the electric side to the rate plan. Other things that Mr. Zern is working on is bringing all of the folks that are in various nearby locations back onto campus, so we're all just working together without any kind of logistical problems.
And Eric, if I might just, those are my personal goals for the year. But I wanted to just point out that this proposed budget does assume the rate increase in the full capital programs for electric and water and the power plant. So you'll have seen where we drop those off in the current year budget. We're assuming we get back to where we need to be, and we've included all of those. If for any reason the rate situation doesn't come out the way we've proposed, we'll have to go back and retool this budget.
But wait, we're looking at 13 and 14 right now. That was budgeted last year, right?
This is 13 and 14. This is proposed. So this is July 1st,
We're currently in
2013 through June 30th, 2014. This is next year's budget.
Next year's budget will be 14, 15.
Fiscal year is July 1st.
June 30th of this year, June 30, 2013 is the end of the fiscal year. So our fiscal year starts July 1st, 2013.
Right, but wasn't this fiscal year's budget completed last year?
No. This fiscal year's budget is 12-13, and that is the one that we showed you last year, which was radically reduced as a result of some of the issues that we were facing. The capital was completely cut out of electric and water. We went through, Eric helped me, the number was about $10.8 million that we needed to cut.
Right, and I should have started this up by clarifying. This is a view of the budget for this upcoming year. This is the budget that has been going through discussions and deliberations. This is for beginning July 1 of the calendar year.
So you're coming to us in June,
Right,
right, showing us what you're budgeting,
right.
and that's going to be effective July 1st.
July 1st. Yes. If in fact the council approves that. Still pending council approval.
Okay.
No, and just to clarify, I mean, we requested this so that we can have more time to view it, maybe.
And that's a good point, Mr. Yao, and I apologize for that, but it has been, we have streamlined the presentation process to the council from back in the day when we do 22, 23 budget study sessions, we do 4. And because you meet monthly and they meet weekly, it can all be said and done in a whisper. We had some changes that we were continuing to make, but my goal is to bring this to you in April. That's what I'd like to do. Just didn't happen this year.
Yeah, or end by April. Okay.
Yeah. So we get you at the April meeting, which is first part of April. And I think we can do that now that we've kind of gotten into the rhythm. Again, a great deal of this is me because this is my first full year with this budget, and I have a lot of issues with how the utility budgets, and we're working on those things. So there was a lot of learning and straightening things out. So, yeah, my goal would be to get it to you in April.
Earlier.
Yeah, much earlier. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, what I've got here is a few different things. It's breaking it down by the specific utility, electric and water. It begins with the comparing the current year's adopted budget to where we think we're going to end up on the budget this year, and then I've included next year's proposed budget in the change. So just at the electric utility, fiscal 12-13 with the $211 million budget, I mean, that's no doubt a lot of money. However, this was basically a tread water type of year for the utility without the rate support to carry forward. We were lean, and we held on and just been working on maintaining kind of status quo. We believe that thanks to Mr. Zern and his team working hard together with the finance folks, that we're going to come in under budget at 206. So even though it was a lean budget, we've managed some pretty good efficiencies. Next year, the electric utility budget is set at 232, which represents about a 9.8% increase. And you know, the inside those numbers, what you're looking at is it's a combination of the rate being approved, bonds issued, but the fundamental thing to reflect on is that number represents what Mr. Zern believes is the prudent, modest running of the utility. This is not a gold-plated wish list. This is him being extremely efficient and but yet acknowledging all of the different types of costs and programs and projects that are being mandated from a variety of resources. It's the same thing with the water side. They have an increase of 26.5%. That should jump out of that slide for you. That's largely representing the rate plan. Next year is the third year of the rate plan. There's a 4% increase in the water revenues that will come through, but there's also bond money in there. We issued the bonds after getting the rates done, so a large chunk of that is the capital money that's being spent. So when we're looking at the budget here at this level, it's a combination of the operation maintenance, but also your capital planning for the year.
I think to emphasize a great deal of that increase is capital.
Yeah.
Great deal of it. In fact, our proposed capital for next year in electric is $30 million, isn't it, Eric?
Combined, it's about that. Yeah, and I've got that down here a little bit.
So you can
later
see our
on.
increase overall is 20. So we've actually reduced the overall budget, but we've injected back the much-needed capital, and I know you support me in that is critical to our utility, absolutely critical. I'm sorry, Eric.
I'm just sorry, I have a quick question on that. The reduction in projected fiscal year 12 to 13, since you're under budget, but since the rates were fixed for the adopted budget for fiscal year 2012 to 2013, where is the difference going? Would we assume that there's additional cash reserve because you were under budget?
Yeah, the difference goes into the reserve, but to get to that lower number, we had to do a lot of heavy lifting. But yeah, the savings goes back into the fund balance.
That would potentially carry over to this fiscal year.
Yeah, however, I'd like to interject
$5
that
million.
some of that is, it goes at this level of looking at our budget that includes a capital plan, that some of it was deferred because we didn't get the funding that we were looking for. So, you know, when it's a timing mechanism, right now, for example, we're looking at next year, and our budget numbers reflect that we are planning to get a rate increase to support a bond issue. If we don't get that, then we'll be back next year showing that we came in under budget because the budget gets approved before the actual sources line up. But Mr. Zern has been very clear with me that we're not going to get ahead of the money. And so if we don't get the rate support, can't do the bonds, you'll see a reflection that we're not spending the money that's being put out there.
Yeah.
But in terms of the $5 million, let's say, that you came in under, is that $5 million reflected in the proposed budget, or is that $5 million that's available in your reserve on top of what you're proposing? It's in that 298 number.
But then I think Mr. Campbell was explaining that some projects were like pushed into the future, right, deferred.
Right.
So there might not have been savings for those.
Yeah.
They're just deferred.
I think
deferring the
Oh,
spending.
because it was, right.
We can always come back at after the year closes and talk through and compare a budget versus actual, how it actually ended up, and be, right out there to help you understand where the numbers fell and what happened with it. There's currently not a decoupling mechanism in our rates, so that if we basically have higher sales and participated, we would reduce the base to ensure that we're not over-collecting on the revenue requirement. That's a topic for another day, but that would be where something like that would come into play.
And just to point out, the majority of that is in the electric utility. There was no capital in there adopted in 12-13. So a great deal of that $5 million is from operations. Mm-hmm. And as you know, we went through some hard times. We went through layoffs. So getting that $5 million was not easy.
Okay, moving along, the next slide is all about salaries and benefits for the electric and water utility. I don't have much to tell you about other than these are the numbers. And this is more taking it in perspective. This is a slice out of a larger presentation that was done to the City Council for the entire city, where this probably had a little bit more context.
I have a question. For Glendale Water and Power, there's this category, retirement incentive.
Ms. Chen, that's the money that the utility, as you recall, we had a retirement incentive program last year.
I don't recall that, actually.
We offered to a qualifying group of individuals
Okay.
an opportunity to take an incentive to retire.
That was a citywide program.
Correct, that was citywide.
Citywide.
But it costs
GWP
money, so
can
everybody has to pay,
Oh, okay.
pay whatever share is of the number of people who, in this case, Water and Power, took that incentive.
I see. Okay, thanks.
But just for comparison purposes, can you compare what this fiscal year proposed budget on these categories compared to the current fiscal year? Where are we pretty much similar to salaries overtime, even though you say that you cut a lot of labor? So does this represent a reduction in those cuts?
You can't see it here. That'd be something I'd have to put on the parking lot and come back to you with.
Or just in general, is it a reduction or an increase?
Yeah, we've gone from a total of I think 400 employees down to 324, which I showed in the first. So these numbers are smaller than what were in the prior years. I just don't have the figure.
Okay, okay. Oh, that's fine. I just want to get a sense that these are actually lower numbers.
Yeah. So here's the operation maintenance expense, the city transfer, and the capital numbers for the year. The capital improvement for electric is 13.8. Again, that's dependent on the rate plan going through and us issuing bonds. The water utility has a capital plan that is bond funded this year, and the city transfer is the $20.6 million, which is the $250,000 less than it was last year, which is the current city's plan on how to manage that.
And I'm just curious about the M&O. Where can the public find some detailed information on that? Because it seems like you're bunching a lot of numbers into that. So how do we know what the breakout is between?
Once the final budget is approved, then it's printed and it's available online. So you can go through in as much detail as you want and see from uniforms to insurance.
But that's good to know. If the public can do that online, they can go to the Glendale Water and Power website and download that once the budget's approved.
I'll find out exactly. I don't know if we have a copy on Water and Power website, but there is one, I think, either on finance. That's where I think it is. And we've got the large book as well that could be available at the counter if somebody wanted to come in and read it.
Go ahead.
I have one question on the transfers. I know we stopped the water utility transfers, but there was also cost allocation mechanism adopted. Where would that cost allocation numbers, where in this would that show up?
The cost allocation would be reflected, it's basically in the O&M. That's why this is a combined number there, but that's where it's sitting. There's costs that are city costs that are allocated to us, and there's costs the utility are charging the city.
And again, that'll be available in the details later?
Absolutely.
Yes.
There's a line item, city line item for every department for the internal service costs.
Thank you.
So then, this is a bit of a summary of the two funds. The electric and water funds are two separate legal funds. The important numbers there to look at are net surplus, the fourth line down. The plan for next year is the electric utility is going to have a reduction of $20 million, while the water utility is turning the corner slowly but surely, and a positive $1.3 million. And answer any questions about that one if you'd like.
Well, what is our reserve for the water side? I know we're going to be at a plus 1.2 million, but is there a number we're trying to get to on the water side?
Yeah,
Trying to get to a positive number.
Yeah. So when I get to the later in this presentation on the talk about the water system a little bit more, my last slide on that is showing the cash reserves and where it's at.
Right. So this is not, even though it's a good thing, it's positive, but we're actually trying to bump up that number a lot more.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing about this. We've got to talk through what all these things mean and don't mean. So then I'd like to spend a couple minutes on the electric utility capital plan. And you can see, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but essentially what you've got is a 5-year plan there that calls for $94 million in spend over that 5-year period. About 2/3 of that is the local distribution system. What you'll see in the next few slides is more detail around some of the projects that are listed. And you'll see, I'll point out a couple of points of interest on this as we go through them. And if you have specific questions about the projects, we can bring up the AGMs and they can talk through those with you. But here's the funding sources. And this drives home. This is for the electric side, 5 years, $94 million. You can see the blue bar. That is the bond money that will be coming in with, if we get the rate support that we need. The red bar represents customer-funded projects. Those are things that customers actually pay us to do rather than coming out of bond money or pay-as-you-go, which is funded from rates. So obviously, without the rate support, the bond issue doesn't happen. The capital program for the electric side is going to collapse, and we'll have to come up with a different version of what we're going to do. Now, the thing I'll point out, I'm getting into some of the detailed slides here, and your chief AGMs can talk in length about any of these, or maybe another day. But what I want to point out quickly is the far right column, prioritization. This is what's nice. We've got a 5-year plan. We've got the sources identified, and we were able to go through an exercise where things are prioritized. So you'll see mandated, safety, customer paid, and reliability. Those are largely the categories. And the folks we're working together with Mr. Zern and myself to get this coordinated. So those are all good things, and these are just the details that I have for you. But I couldn't begin to speak on some of this. I can leave you with on the electric side. If you look at the cash balances, you've got the big number there to look at is the unrestricted cash reserves of $57 million. That number there would be the one you would compare with the council directed $124 million level of balance that we would have on hand.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Customer service expenses and also costs and things like that, and collections and bad debt and things like that. Where is all that included? In the electric or in the water?
It's split, it's allocated.
Split.
Yeah, it's one group of folks, and there's an allocation to divide those two costs up.
Okay, okay. And what would you say would be the percentage of bad debt that we're provisioning?
Bad debt, the percentage, I don't have that number on top of me. Tammy?
Ms. Valle?
Hi. I'm sorry, I was caught off guard, but I think it's at 0.02% we've been at, so it's very small. And I want to say that electric, we budgeted $250,000 and water $50,000. I believe those are the numbers.
300,000 for whole GWP?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, then what I could do is talk to you briefly.
Can I ask you a
about-
question on one more thing? So I'm looking through all these different capital programs. I'm not seeing anything in here, or maybe I'm missing it, on the, any of the, I know we deferred some of the smart grid work. Is that in here?
It's included in there, yes.
Sorry, I'm missing it.
Yeah, what you've got here at this slide I've got on the screen right now is...
That's the utility modernization.
Utility modernization, yes. And that will finish us out, 13-14 should finish us out at least on our initial agreement with the DOE. And then, as you see, we have future projections as we continue our modernization efforts.
Okay, thank you.
So then, moving on to the water side, the capital plan, what you've got there is a 5-year, $40 million plan, and basically it can be carved into two major buckets, the potable water and recycled water. There's a lot of further breakdown there. In the following slides, I got the sources lined out here for you, so you can see, you know, we recently issued debt. You're looking at, we're finishing off that work over the next 2 years primarily. Then we'll be pay-as-you-go type capital work on the water side. The rest of these slides are just more detail that our chief AGM could get up and speak to you about.
Mr. President, members of the commission, these are all consistent. As you recall, when we were going out for the bond, we brought you the list of projects, so we've remained consistent with that on the water side.
And is there, on this water side, I know there's a lot of back and forth on the chromium-6 issue. Is that in here, too?
Well, the chromium-6 is not funded by the city. It's funded 100% outside, so we don't budget for that, and then we get reimbursed. So where the future of that goes, Ramon may want to speak to that. It's our initial responsibility has been completed, but there is some additional work that may need to be done. Ramon, do you want to speak to that briefly?
Good afternoon. On the Chrome 6, on the report that we submitted back in February, we committed to the state that we will finish some more of the studies to look at the other technologies, like the RCF technology, in addition to look at additional resins that we use for WBA treatment. We're currently working on additional Proposition 50 funding so that we can complete the additional work, the fine-tuning, if you will, on the different technologies by the end of this calendar year. By December, we should have the results of those studies.
And the responsible parties are continuing to participate as well?
That's correct. There's a $143,000 that you would see on your budget sheet. We still have to front the money. That's why we budget for that. What we get reimbursed either through the GRG and through the other parties that are contributing. Half of that is mainly coming from the Proposition 50 or from the state.
Thank you.
So here's the slide that shows the cash balance, and the number is labeled cash reserve deficit. We're projecting that at the end of the year, the water system will still have a deficit of $16.4 million. It peaked out at about 21, 22, somewhere around there last year, so the number is moving in the right direction, just we'd all like it to move a little bit quicker.
And as the new rates get implemented, the point, I think we're still on track to get back on track. Okay.
So that's what I had. If there's any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise,
So let's get back to the water deficit, reserve deficit. So the previous slide you showed $1.3 million net positive, but on your last slide, you show a cash reserve deficit of $16 million. So would that $1.3 million go into that cash deficit, and as we get positive, then that cash deficit will?
well, it's yes and no. The fund balance is basically the net assets of the utility, the fund. It's not just cash. Whereas the previous slide here with the negative 16, that is a deficit in cash. So the earlier comparison was basically revenues minus expenses plus the net value of some items. So it just comes out to that there is a positive increase in the net assets, but not necessarily in cash. I mean, the change in cash is about $4 or $5 million from the earlier in the year. So just there are two different sets of numbers that mean different things. This is cash.
Yeah, but I recall one reason for the water rate increase was over time, 3 to 5 years, that we would bring up our cash reserve so
Yes.
that we become positive. So is that still the trend
Yes.
moving forward?
Yes.
Okay, but this one shows that we still have $60 million deficit.
Better than 22.
Right. So
we're moving in the right direction. It's just, as Eric said, nobody more than me would like to see this done tomorrow, but it's going to take us a little time to climb out. So we'll have to go the full rate process, which was 4 years in this case, before we see this. And
It's
at the
gonna-
end of that fourth year, to see us out of this.
Right. So, I mean, a bar graph or a bar chart would show you a little bit better of illustrate the change. It's basically improved about $5 million from the start of the year.
All right, so that's great that we're moving in the right direction.
The only place we can go.
Other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a speaker, Mr. Herbert Milano.
President Armenian, members of the Glendale Water and Power Commission and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I have a couple of questions for you. These are questions, I guess, that I generally pose after a budget meeting, especially for the other associations that I belong to. If, after the closing of this meeting today, you were to pencil out what the budget for the Glendale Water and Power is, could you do it from memory? Say, okay, this electric utility, $200 million in revenues, and water utility, $40 million, and capital needs are such. You know, I ask myself that question. It's a rhetorical question, really, for you, but it's because these type of reports that the city has been doing for years are not adequate. Definitely not. Look at the tremendous amount of small detail that you find in all of these reports to see if they're really meaningful. Meaningful to me is if you were to take, for example, a trend line on a consistent expenditure or a consistent measure. So let's assume that we're doing the water and power, and you're looking at a base that you can compare year to year. So you say, okay, what is my revenue per, let's say, acre foot of water, or 1,000 acre feet, or whatever number you want to define. And you say, all right, based upon that, this is the amount of that is revenues that we generate from that, and there's so much on salary, and so much of that is pension, so much of that is benefit, and so forth. So you have a consistent measure year to year, because the numbers vary from year to year, so you want a consistent way. And what would it be for electricity? Maybe, 1,000 megawatts as your basic measure, and then you compare labor and so forth. How many people does it require to produce, 1 megawatt? 1 million watts. Or, you need a way that you can compare year to year and see the trend lines. So you had a significant reduction in staff this past year. You wonder, were they all needed in the first place? No, staff changes according to the amount of capital improvement that you have. So if you provide very little capital improvement, you figure what in the world is going to happen to the staff that is normally assigned to capital improvement. And that's the reason why organizations have hourly workers. Because in order to maintain the year-to-year functioning, the operations of a company, right, you keep that salary staff, but whenever you have these increases and decreases in other types of projects like capital improvements, then you hire and you fire according to those needs. So I have a question to ask you. Do you have the parts that are missing from here? And the items that are missing is an overall view of the capital, the state of the current structure of the current assets. In a way, you kind of get a bit of information on that when you look at the depreciation number every year. For example, in the electricity rate, you had roughly $19 million in depreciation, which is not, as you know, a cash expenditure. And you had a proposal for a $90 million transfer. How interesting. If you were to compare how much depreciation there is on electricity year to year, that pretty much matches the amount that has actually been transferred to the general fund. What does it tell you? It tells you that you're not putting money away on a pay-as-you-go basis, right? A sinking fund of some sort to take care of capital improvements. That should have been obvious to you all of these years. But you don't get that top-level information. The top-level information will give you, for example, how old and what is the current potential burden of replacing the reservoirs, for example, or the pumps or the valves or the lines that are out there, the water mains, to say, wait a second, we are in arrears, potential arrears of whatever, $300 million, and it divided as such. So every year you get a sense of what the backlog is if you do not put money away for those capital improvements. That's not relevant here. You got a lot of very small numbers that are totally irrelevant to making top-level decisions. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the type of graphs and charts provided by McKinsey & Company. Whenever they make a major presentation, they do it on one or two PowerPoints. That's it. And you see the cascading effect that it has. And that's what you need. I would say have staff come back with really relevant information that allows you to see the top-level condition of the GWP. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, next agenda item, please.
5, oral communications.
We have one speaker, Mr. Herbert Milano.
President Armenia and members of the GWP Commission. My name is Herbert Milano. I have taken an interest in the GWP for all of these years that I've been coming here because I guess to a great degree I felt as a resident and as a stakeholder and as a property owner for now 26 years that and having paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in utility fees, that I feel that I'm really a stakeholder in how this thing operates. And I took an interest simply because I look at financial statements as part of my business. I install financial systems. And one of the things that we have been doing, especially during the last 12 years, is what is called business intelligence. Taking all of the data that's out there and making it relevant for decision making. And I can tell you this much from my impression, from my experience in dealing with private companies from 50 million to 1 billion, larger than this, is that the information that you get is not commensurate with the quality of information that private companies get. Is there a reason why you do not receive on a monthly basis a financial statement? There isn't a single company that has been my customer or that we attended to, it's over 200 of them, that does not receive a monthly financial statement. Our goal when we install a system is to have an organization close their books 3 days after the end of the month. Why doesn't that happen here? You still have accruals and deferrals. You still make those adjustments at the end of the month. You don't have to have all the information. Why don't you receive it? Why don't you demand it? It's not that I'm putting you, on the firing line here, but it simply is the kind of question that I would expect commissioners to ask of the staff. Look, the financial statements for the Glendale Water and Power came out in February of this year. Well, the year ended last year in June. You think that would be acceptable? You think that corporations that need to turn in the results, if they're doing a 1020 financial report, they're demanded, within 2.5 months. Here it is, 8 months later, and we get the financial reports. Why? I get suspicious about things like that. And the reason why I get suspicious is that it allows you to, in a way somebody doesn't like the numbers, to figure out and to backtrack some of these numbers. By having monthly financial statement, it prevents anyone from coming back and massaging those numbers. It really does. Because then you have to go back, it's really tough. And that's one of the major reasons why you do it. Performance indicators are available to you because there are a lot of private entities that deal with electricity, and the production of water. And look at those key performance indicators and say, are we doing the same thing? In order to produce water from wells, let's say an acre foot or 1,000 acre feet, let's say, we produce something like 29,000 acre feet of water. How many men does it require to do it? How many supervisors? What's the ratio should be? Those are top level items that it's easier to comprehend if they give you relevant information. Here is my evaluation on it. The type of reports that the city produces are generally applicable to individuals who are already basically working for the bond companies, right? These are MBAs who are really top of the line, and they get this very complex report, and they're doing it every single day, and they get a stack of them that they evaluate. And even then, they make mistakes because they don't get the full story. These financial reports are not really meant for you or for the public. And so what the staff generally does is they stack you with a whole bunch of a lot of minutia, and you get lost in the minutia, and you don't get to see the top-level items. Because if it were the case, you would have seen a long time ago that those transfers were hitting capital improvements dead on. And eventually what you wind up is borrowing money to take care of the capital improvements. You heard it today. Because the money was transferred over to take care of general fund issues. They're that close. So when people talk about return on investment, for whom? Return on investment for the public? We're paying more. It's return on investment for the employees, particularly fire employees. That's who they apparently own already, the utility. It's a political opinion, but that's what I see when you do not have clear, top-level, concise financial reports that you could understand and you can tell off right away to anyone, that you can see a trend line. Ask for trend lines. Ask for relevant top-level information because that's what you deserve and that's what we deserve as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have one question. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask with regarding to the budget. I was going to ask you where the process stood at this point with City Council.
We completed the last of the study sessions. I don't know if Finance has any cleanup, but I imagine that I think it's the mid-month meeting. It has to be approved, obviously, adopted by the end of this month. So I think it's either it's the second meeting of the month. It'll be introduced and then adopted.
Not this week, maybe next week.
It won't be this week. I think it's next week. Next week, the 12th.
I believe it's the 12th. I think it might be the 18th and then the 25th or 26th, the week after that.
Thank you. Okay, next agenda item.
6, agenda forecast.
Mr. President, let me throw a monkey wrench in the whole process here for you. That week is obviously the week of 4th of July. Mm-hmm. The City Council has essentially canceled all meetings for that week, so we will have no budget, no council meetings for that week. A lot of people are on vacation. I wanted to propose that we move those items down to August, which I don't think is a problem. Many of these are duplicative, and a couple we need to clean up. And then, that leaves our mid-July special meeting in place as well. Just a thought. It may be just me and you here.
So you're proposing canceling?
Canceling that meeting consistent with what the council's done with the rest of the meetings for that week.
So cancel that meeting, move those agenda items to the August 5th
meeting.
Agenda item, and then we would have in July just the special meeting regarding revenue enhancement.
Correct.
Do you know the date yet for the special meeting?
No, I'm guessing it's either going to be the second or third week of July. It could go as far as the last week of July. It all depends on how we roll through these community outreach meetings, but I want to try to get it to you. My goal is to get it to you by third week latest. And I think we can make that August agenda manageable. As I said, some of these are duplicative, and I'll manipulate it and send out a proposed agenda.
Yeah, the utility modernization is a duplicate, and then there's the city attorney's office report, which is new.
And we're not quite ready on the legislative update, so that may be more in September anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones are usually pretty quick.
I would be fine with that.
Same here.
Are we moving all the July items to August? Is that the proposal?
Yes, except one of them is a duplicate utility modernization update. So, other than that, so the really the additions are energy risk management, customer service update, NERC WEC. Mr. Zern is saying ledge update might not be available, water services update, renewable energy quarterly update.
Yeah, and those are usually pretty quick items.
Yeah, we also have the feed-in tariff, right? That's not on this item, but...
Feed-in tariff goes to council this month.
Right, so we should be able to have that on the August item.
If you'd like, we can.
I thought that was discussed last meeting, that we're going to have the feed-in tariff report for the August.
And the NERC WEC, we can take that out because
we have it right back in September. Yeah.
Yeah,
we can add the feed-in
feed-in
tariff.
tariff in August.
Ms. Cadenas would love to do that.
Absolutely.
That way we can give you a nice holiday week.
Okay, so
So
is everyone okay with
July
that?
meeting is canceled. Is that
Yeah,
what it is?
all right.
That reschedule is just canceled.
Can't just canceled, yep. And then we'll wait on a proposed date, which will probably be the second half of July for the special meeting on the revenue enhancement. Will be our next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay?
Sorry, I'll keep you posted on that.
Yep.
So since we're not going to see each other in July, until that special meeting, if it's going to push
Yeah, something
back,
changes.
I'll let you all know that.
So if there's any agenda item, then Mr. President can let you know.
He can.
Can contact you in the meantime and let me know any hot topic items come up.
Okay, and then in the meantime, since that's happening, if council makes its decisions on commissioner replacements or reappointments, that would be, the mid-July, if it happens before mid-July, that would be the meeting that they would begin their term? Is that how that would work?
It's as soon as they're appointed.
Right.
I should note, you also had deferred your officer elections to your regularly scheduled July meeting. That might be where you were going with this. So you should find a place for that as well. August makes sense.
Yeah. So let's add that to August. Officer elections. Okay, well, if I don't see you mid-July, it's been a pleasure working with all of you.
I'll
I
bet on
get all
that.
that.
I'll bet that all of you will be back.
We'll see about that.
At least
Not so
until
sure about
September.
that. You never know.
But I'm
Okay.
gonna make that.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.